I wrote this little book as an essay in 1987. I'd been away in a coma for 3 weeks with a bung liver. The only time I was ever sick, actually, physically, and very nearly pegged it. And I came back and still very weak. I gradually hauled myself up and wrote this book about how wonderful it felt not to have depressive illness, because I'd just come through 8 years of it. And anyhow, people went on buying the lecture was given and printed as a book, and people went on buying it, and now they've gone and reprinted it. And I've got and all has had a selection of poems at the end of it, which has now got a bit longer. And when the idea was mooted of republishing the book, I said, well, I'd have to put in an afterword, because I found after a while that where I thought I had recovered from depressive illness in 1987, I hadn't at all. I was merely in remission, and I gradually went crazy again. I spent about 23 years of my life, I guess, in the grip of the black dog. The first time started when I was about 20, or just about to be 21. I drifted slowly at Sydney University into a kind of inanition in which I had no energy at all much. I even stopped sleeping in beds and started sleeping on golf links and places. And 1961, I drifted down here to Melbourne and lay around Tony Cody's house in Carlton for a few months until his mother threw me out for wearing his clothes. And he stayed on at Melbourne University and became a professor of philosophy. And a very good man he is indeed, and I'm still grateful to him for that hospitality way back then. In those days there was no Carlton, there was only Jimmy Watson's. And the rest of it was created because of me, and I came back and found that Carlton had become very satisfactory, thank you. It was, so I take credit for Carlton. I then drifted off to Darwin and places by way of everywhere else, and came back and suddenly snapped out of it. I got up out of the grass and got myself together and met a fine girl born in Hungary but raised in Switzerland, called Valerie, and we married, and we ended up having 5 children, and we've done pretty well so far. And my mate, who died the other day, said after a week of our marriage, is this ill-considered mismatch still hanging together, he said. And 47 years later, yes. We've taught each other a heck of a lot. And that was to speak of a side of my life I'll mostly leave out of this lecture, because I reckon the private sphere is the private sphere, if maybe just the odd sidelong mention here and there. I came from the bush, a place called Bunya, which is a valley between Foster and Gloucester in New South Wales, and my parents were dreadfully poor, and I didn't realise at first that poverty was anything to worry about, because I'd never been in the world before. I came to the world unrehearsed like the rest of us, and I thought it was all right. But gradually the tremendous shame they had about the whole matter, and the great resentment they had against my grandfather, who kept them poor because of the old system of, you can't have any wages, but I'll leave you the farm when I die. You know, the old system that used to work in the bush. It's largely gone now. And I only gradually found out why that existed between my grandfather and my father. And the story's worth telling, I suppose, because it's brief. Dad had a slightly younger brother called Archie. Archie is a name that's only just come back. For a long time it was gone. In the First World War it meant anti-aircraft fire. But Archibald Murray died a month before I was born in 1938 because his father, my grandfather, wanted a certain tree cut down in the bush. Dad was an experienced timberman. They'd been working together on timber for about 8 years, bullock driving and cutting timber and all that. Dad said, that tree's no good, it's rotten, it's dozy, full of white ants, in other words. Oh, you can't leave the bloody trees in the bush, you know. And Dad said, well, you want to cut it down so bad, you cut it down. So grandfather, who never cut anything down except the goodwill of his sons, went to Archie and got him to cut it down. He had no experience at all in timber and couldn't judge that this tree was in fact desperately risky, and he filled it into his brain and died. And that was between my father and his father for the rest of their lives. That Dad had caused his brother to get killed, or grandfather had caused his son to be killed. Then, so Dad was on this farm that he paid rent for, his father owned. His father wouldn't let him make any improvements on it, and didn't pay him the 8 years of wages he owed either. And then, in the midst of all this, my mother died of her third miscarriage. I was the only child who got alive through her system. The other three died on the way, and I sort of blamed myself. I picked up out of the air the idea that I was somehow responsible for this, that I'd done the damage. And so I arrived at the age of 12 with a fair few neuroses bubbling away under the surface. I didn't know the word neurosis. I could spell it, but that was all. Mother died. Dad was kind of wreckage for years, so suddenly I was kind of effectively orphaned. And he did his best, poor fella, but he was really wrecked. He never got over Mum's death. When I went to university, I only had a few dollars or pounds, as we had then, to make, to get along. And I spent my time, instead of studying, I spent my time reading, as you do. I'd never seen a decent library in my life before, and there was Fisher Library with 2.5 million volumes. I swore I'd read it all except the mathematics, Wonderful. Plunged into it. And year after year went on reading and learning languages and playing around, and occasionally even going to exams. And gradually, having almost no money, I drifted out of sleeping in beds and rooms and things, and started living rough in Sydney, and then lived rough, came down here, as I said, and over to Darwin and things. A disaster that happened to me in school, my third school. The first one had 16 pupils. Second one was a little country, what they called how would they call them in those days? Central school. It wasn't really a high school. Went to about halfway through the high school curriculum. Then I went off to a regular high school in the town of Taree, and it was hell written darkly in bad ink. I tell you, it was full of a lot of bullying, and it was all feminine bullying. You can't fight back against the other sex. If you're attacked by bullies, you better hope that they're the same sex as yourself, because you've got a chance with them, but against the other sex you've got no chance. And I was given to understand that I was, in some strange way, unsuitable for the world, that I didn't fit in. I was ridiculous. I was not worth calling by my real name. I was beneath consideration. There were two kinds there, those who actively did this and the others who can, I suppose they were scared of it happening to them, so they kept their mouths prudently shut. Their mouths certainly didn't open in my direction. And I went out of that school with an unacknowledged, unconscious sort of rage and despair in myself, which said, you have been rejected by womanhood. It is completely, you do not understand why it has happened, but it's happened. The world is full of people to whom this has happened, and the sentence is irrevocable. And the university with no money to take anybody out, it went on being irrevocable, And so I was good and neurotic by the time I'd been in university for a few years. Now this sort of stuff and far worse has happened to thousands of people. The world's full of them, full of us. What I call erocides, those who have been sort of dismissed from the great game of mating. And then I met my wife and came to my senses about all that. But I still swore that I would never have anything to do with an Australian woman, That one lasted till I was about 45. Then I didn't have anything to do with the Australian woman. I just said it was crazy. It was a neurosis. And I thought I'd just give you that as background anyway. The first time I went crazy, I was passive and without any energy, and you could spend, the set of symptoms where you can lie around all day making up your mind to reach for a cigarette because it's such a shattering effort to get that much energy together. The second time was 1988. I had what felt like a heart attack and thought I was for it, and my wife checked me over and said, "Well, I don't think you've had anything of the sort," she said, "but you've had something that scared you. We'd better go to casualty." Went in there, was put straight into the cardiac ward, amongst a whole lot of people with red and white faces who clearly were very sick, I was starting to feel like a bit of a fraud at this stage. I thought I was sick, but it's gone away totally. I met a fellow there who said, "Oh, good day, lads." He said, "Oh, well, we used to know each other at school." He said, "You see that table over there?" "Yeah." I said, "What about that table, Arthur?" He said, "Oh, I died 4 times on that bastard the other day," he said, "the other night. They brought me back with the old shockers." I thought, I'm among serious company here. And next day they'd done all the checking of blood and things, and they said that, "No, you haven't had a heart attack. You're not going to have a heart attack. You've had something. We think you probably had a panic attack." "What's that?" says I. They sent me off to the shrink, and he told me all the medical endocrinological side of depression, the oversupply of adrenaline in the brain and the undersupply of serotonin and all that sort of thing you've doubtless heard about. And for the next few years I had one hell of a time with these physical symptoms, particularly hypochondria, thinking I was going to die. I was going to die all the time, I could go 100 times a week, to the brink and never quite die. And I'd ring up the doctor sometimes and say, "Oh, look, I've got to be dying." No, that's not a cancer. That's a pimple. It was very serious. It's all the comedy of hell, actually, being a depressive. You really believe it. You know that you're in the grip of an illusion, but sometimes it gets to be hard to believe. And I'll read you a few poems, mainly to illustrate various points. This one's an actual account of a panic attack, as an example of the direct experience of it. Panic attack. The body had a nightmare, awake. No need of the movie. No need of light to keep hips and shoulders rotating in bed on the gimbals of wet eyes. Pounding heart, chest pains. Should it be the right arm hurting? The brain was a void or blasted out chamber. Shreds of speech in there, shatters of lust and prayer. No one can face their heart or turn their back on it. Bowel stumbled to bowl, emptied and emptied again, till the gut was a train crawling in its own tunnel, slowly dragging the nightmare down with it, below heart level. You would not have died. The fear had been too great. But to miss the ambulance moment. Relax, in time your hourglass will be reversed again. And there's a kind of almost addictive quality about the experience. You go halfway towards loving it. I'll read you first, though, about school bullying, which may not even be the cause of my trouble, but certainly it provided a lot of good symptoms. Burning want. From just on puberty I lived in funeral. Mother dead of miscarriage, father trying to be dead. We'd boil sweat brown cloth. Cows repossessed the garden. Love-making brought death was the unuttered principle. I met a tall adopted girl some kids thought aloof, but she was intelligent. Her poise of white blonde hair proved her no kin to the squat tan couple who loved her. Only now do I realise she was my first love. But all my names were fat names at my new town school. Between classes, kids did erocide, destruction of sexual morale, mass refusal of unasked love. That works. Boys cheered as 17-year-old girls came onto me, then ran back, whinnying ridicule. The slender girl came up on holidays from the city to my cousin's farm. She was friendly and sane. Whispers giggled round us. A letter was written as from me, and she was there in mid-term instantly. But I called people the humans, not knowing it was rage. I learned things sidelong, taking my rifle for walks, recited every scene of From Here to Eternity, burned paddocks and soldiered back each Monday to that dawning teen age. She I admired and almost relaxed from placating, was gnawed by knowing what she came from, not who. Showing off was my one social skill, oddly never with her, but I dissembled feelings till mine were unknown to me too. And I couldn't add my want to her shortfall of wantedness. I had 40 more years with one dear remission of a white paralysis. She's attracted, it's not real, nothing is enough. She's mistaken, she'll die, go now, she'll tell, any minute she'll laugh. Whether other hands reached out to Marion or didn't, at 19 in her training ward, she had a fatal accident. Alone at night, they said, with a lethal injection, and was spared from seeing what my school did to the world. It's almost like that phrase in the Bible about that story in the Bible about there shall be two in a field and one shall be taken and one shall be left. Marion didn't have, her problem was a feeling of sort of non-existence because she'd been adopted and had killed her. She committed suicide. And I had this other strange expulsion from the human race that I think I took up writing poetry instead of suicide, you know. And my timing was way off too. I should mention this just in passing. I had an underground reputation amongst academe for a while of being a fierce anti-feminist and that sort of thing. Because I wrote a bad book called, what the hell was it called? It was a verse novel anyway, it was a bad one. But it had a character in that it was a lunatic kind of early feminist. It was full of rage, non-stop day and night rager. And nothing that she said in this overdone pose was other than things that had been shouted in my face when I was just after university, when feminism came along. It was a tremendous licensing of hate and anger and rage, you know, and I took it all personally. A lot of people with unhealthy minds like me probably did. We thought we were being blamed for the general repression of women over the last few thousand years. And it was my fault that they weren't getting equal pay and stuff. And so I took it rather badly and wrote that bad novel. But I think I wrote around it and wrote a few other decent things since, so it might be all right. One thing though you do find, publish a book and it never goes away. The addictive side of depressive illness, a poem called Corniche. It's an answer to a poem by Philip Larkin, a very great poet, called Ubad, where he wakes up at 4 in the morning and fantasises about death, how much it's another 12 hours closer, you know, it's a whole day closer. And he's terrified of it, and he's imagining it's a complete atheist death, you know. And I couldn't see the point because it just seemed to be saying that he was going nowhere and it wasn't going to hurt. But I thought I knew what was the trouble with him. He had undiagnosed depression. So I replied to it with this poem, Corniche, because I'm afraid of heights and I don't like a road that drops away on one side. I work all day and hardly drink at all. I can reach down and feel if I'm depressed. I adore the Creator because I made myself, and a few times a week a wire jags in my chest. The first time I'd been coming apart all year, weeping, incoherent, cigars had given me up. Any road round a cliff edge I'd whimper along in low gear. Then cardiac horror, masking my pulses, calm, lubbed up. It was the victim sickness, adrenaline howling in my head, the black dog was my brain. Come to drown me in my breath was energy's black hole, depression, compere of the pre-dawn show, when, returned from a pea, you stew and welter in your death. The rogue space rock is on course to snuff your world, sure, But go acute and its oncoming fills your day. The brave die but once. I could go 100 times a week, clinging to my pulse with the world's edge inches away. Laugh who never shrank round wizened genitals there or killed themselves to stop dying. The blow that never falls batters you stupid. Only gradually do you notice a slight scorn in you for what appalls. A self inside self, cool as conscience, one to be erased in your final night or faxed, still knows beneath all the mute grand opera and uncaused effect that death which can be imagined is not true death. The crunch is illusion. There's still no outside world, but you start to see. You're like one enthralled by bad art. Yet for a real onset, what cover? You gibber to casualty, are checked, scorned, calmed, there's nothing wrong with your heart. The terror of death is not afraid of death. Fear, pure, is intransitive. A Hindenburg of vast rage rots, though, above your life. See it, and you feel flogged. But like an addict, you sniffle aboard to your cage. Because you will cling to this beast as it gnaws you, for the crystal in its kidneys, the elixir in its wings, till your darlings are the police of an immense fatigue. I came to the world unrehearsed, but I've learned some things. When you curl stuffed in the pot at rainbow's end, it is life roaring and racing and nothing you can do. Were you really God, you could have lived all the lives that now decay into misery and cripple you. A for adrenaline, the original A-bomb. Fuel and punishment of aspiration, the Enlightenment's airburst. Back when God made me, I had no script. It was better. For all the death, we also die unrehearsed. That thing about the blow that never falls batters you stupid is very true. It wastes a tremendous amount of your time being crazy. I would have written a lot more and better if I hadn't had it, I think, in some ways. Occasionally it does give you a poem that you'll get no other way. It'll kick a hole right through your respectability and your regard for the proprieties, and you'll write the thing. You won't be too scared to write it. But I would say, proportionally, I wrote a hell of a lot of poems while I was ill, and nobody could have told that I was ill. But occasionally a poem would come through that was straight from hell. This one's called Rock Music, and it's of that category. Sex is a Nazi. The students all knew this at your school. To it, everyone's subhuman for parts of their lives. Some are all their lives. You'll be one of those if these things worry you. The beautiful Nazis, why are they so cruel? Why, to castrate the aberrant, the original, the wounded, who might change our species and make obsolete the true race, which is those who never leave school. For the truth, we are silent. For the flattering dream, in massed farting reassurance, we spasm and scream. But what is a Nazi but sex pitched for crowds? It's the Calvin SS. You are what you've got, and you'll wrinkle and fawn and work after your shot, though tears pour in secret from the hot indoor clouds.